Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Becky, I'm the Chief Exec of the English Association, and it's a real pleasure to be hosting the session this afternoon. A quick word about the EA. We are a learned society and subject association which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through to secondary and further education, to higher education and beyond, and we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers, so thank you so much, Rob, for giving us your time and expertise so generously this afternoon. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. Throughout October, you can get a taste and join us until the end of December for as little as £7. And then for 2026, it will cost just from £29 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year. And you get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. Right, that was my bump. So it's my pleasure to hand over to you, Rob, for the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Rob Myles. I'm a multi-award-winning creative director, actor, stage combat instructor, fight director, general investigative practitioner. I'm also a Shakespeare obsessive. I've directed all 36 First Folio plays of Shakespeare, and I've acted in over 30 different roles in mid-scale regional touring, OffWestEnd and immersive experiences. I've taught Shakespeare at East 15, Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I've been invited to speak at Shakespeare's Globe and Harvard University, and many more institutions who are similarly obsessed with Shakespeare. I've post-rationalized my work, I guess you could say, into a conceptual framework that I call Original Parallels, which aims to leverage Shakespeare in service of two things. The first, critically engaged citizenship, essentially proactively coexisting for the benefit of the common good. And two, resonance, a state of heightened emotion in which both work and audience are mutually affected and transformed. We do this by combining scholarly rigor on early modern practices with modern innovation methodologies to produce a series of novel outcomes, one of which is the Illuminated Text, which we're going to talk about today. I asked my preview question just to get a kind of sense check on the people that we were going to have in the room. And I can say without doubt that we are preaching to the choir here, which is by no means a bad thing. I'm glad that so many people see Shakespeare in such a detailed and all-encompassing way. In terms of what Shakespeare is good for in 2025, I kind of collated everything into three major themes. The first, issues, exploring a multitude of issues like social justice, global awareness, knife crime, global warming, racism, free speech, sexism, how we respond in extreme situations. The second is thinking, the beauty of the language, the layered analysis, the exploring of complex ideas, cross-curricular links, critical thinking, argumentation. And then finally, which I thought was really interesting, a new religion. The number one reply that we got for Shakespeare, what is it good for, was everything. Other words like timeless, universal human experience. One person even went so far as to say Shakespeare is always good. So we needn't spend any time convincing people of the case for using Shakespeare and what Shakespeare could be used for in the classroom. But the Illuminated Text is nevertheless one, what I hope is a novel and distinct way to interact with it, which may change perceptions among students about Shakespeare, his works, and how they might be useful to them. So, as I've said, I've been obsessed with Shakespeare for about 15 years now. The Illuminated Text is one expression of that obsession. It's an open access, interactive text adventure through one of Hamlet's relatively lesser known speeches, I suppose, the "Look here upon this picture" speech. The Illuminated Text was produced for the Stratford Festival in Ontario, Canada, which is honestly, having had the chance to go there, the platonic ideal of what a Shakespearean theatre company should feel like. And the piece had several aims and went about achieving those in several ways. So the first of those aims was to provide this different perception of Shakespeare, getting away from this genius on a pedestal and towards the craftsman, as I call him, the inky-fingered son of a glover. We wanted to create a rich sensorial experience that embraced complexity, but also that had as much in common with graffiti, comic books, and hip-hop as traditional Shakespeare. We deliberately defaced the text in order to reveal it, and I'll talk more about that in a second. The next of our goals was to create a sense of agency in the exploration. We used video game mechanics to create a sense of reward around self-led discovery, which was informed by the notion that with Shakespeare, the more you seek, the more you find. So it becomes more like an exploration open world game than a kind of page on the stage or sage on the stage kind of situation. Lastly, perhaps mostly importantly, it was about putting those discoveries to use and becoming an apprentice like Shakespeare himself was, and like people like Fletcher and others might have been to Shakespeare himself, put simply to learn by doing. So to achieve that, we first ran a small-scale manual pilot with a short section of Antony and Cleopatra, and we worked on that with some school kids on a summer school to see whether the idea might capture their interest, and it very much did. And so then we looked at how we could roll it out large-scale on a digital platform, and we used the Stornoway.io interactive framework, which was developed by the same people that worked on Netflix's interactive Bandersnatch episode. We actually stretched it beyond what were then its capabilities and expanded what was possible through the framework to create what I hope is a seemingly seamless experience for the audience. It has over 172 hotspots, so things that you can click to discover more, and over 90 minutes of original content that are explored across 4 dimensions: rhythm, rhetoric, sound, and imagery. In a moment, we're going to watch the introduction together. Once we've done that, we'll then split into breakout rooms where you will receive a link to one of the 4 dimensions to explore. Bear in mind, as soon as you've clicked that link, you will be on your own. So if it moves, click it, and the other instructions should be fairly transparent, but you are free to roam wherever you may. We'll do that for about 10 or so minutes. I'll dot into and out of the different rooms to see how people are getting on. We'll then return, we'll take a quick look at the final secret 5th dimension, and then we'll open the floor for some discussion and Q&A. So with that, I think we should play the introduction. Thank you so much.
The Illuminated Text, exploring an ancient craft in 4 dimensions. Shakespeare was a writer in a time when that meant getting your hands dirty. He was writing speeches with ink and feathers. Look at this. This is his handwriting. Can you read it? I can't. And that's cool. He's not just a writer. He is a part owner of the playhouse, an actor, a family man, and rumor has it, a bit of a naughty boy. He's got a lot going on. He was probably in a hurry. When he died, Shakespeare's friend Ben said, "His mind and hand went together, and what he thought, he uttered with that easiness that we have scarce received from him a blot in his papers." Really, Ben? Not a blot? I see ink stains, crossing out, rewrites, mistakes. This is a guy who worked his craft. Ben also said that he who casts to write a living line must sweat, and that a good poet's made as well as born. That I get. Shakespeare the sweaty, Shakespeare the stained, Shakespeare the scribbler, Shakespeare the sculptor? After all, he's crafting ideas with his bare hands. So how much craft is there under the surface of these words? Take a look at this.
All right, I think we'll leave it
This
there.
is probably more what you're used to.
To give you a preview of what's going to happen next in the students' experience, they'll see a plain text version of the script, which is then going to be read aloud in character by the narrator, and that's going to transform into the visually half calligraphy, half street art interpretation of the text that you are now going to spend your time exploring. And then they will be invited to choose one of the 4 dimensions. Now, as we are fighting time and we're taking a whistle-stop tour, we're going to split you into breakout rooms now so that you can explore one of those dimensions per breakout room. And then we can come back together and we can share our discoveries before we have a chat and a Q&A. So I think at this point, Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind throwing us into our various dimensions, and we will make a start.
I will do that. All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Off we go, and I'll pop into each room with the links.
Thank you. So check the chat for the links and then put yourself on mute and play them as you want to. And obviously, if you want to come off mute to converse between yourselves, you're more than welcome.
Right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us again from the breakout rooms. Hope you had a good time exploring. Right, Rob, back to you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so we're just going to talk briefly now about what follows one of the 4 dimensions. Obviously, for yourselves, you will have only seen one of the 4. But once a player has been through each of those 4 dimensions, it doesn't matter how many of the hotspots they've clicked. They don't have to spend a particularly long amount of time in each one. But once they've visited each of the 4, a secret 5th dimension will open, which is the Over to You section, in which the artist who collaborated with me on bringing the visuals of this piece to life, Alice Matsili, will actually take you through a how-to guide on calligraphy and street art basics, and also writing with emotion and writing to express emotion, with writing being as much of visual art as a kind of form of notation as well. And so if we just want to play a clip, Rebecca, for that, just by way of preview, so that you can see the kind of resources that are made available.
The best way to learn is to do. Now it's over to you. Our artist, Alice Mazzilli, will introduce you to the techniques she used to bring this interpretation to life, so you can too. Pick a new piece of text you love. It could be a whole speech or just a few lines. Use the tools you've discovered to explore it and then bring its secrets to life. Here's how.
Lovely. And so here you can see that we have several resource areas. So the
Now I'd like to show you some particular.
So that's Alice. She's just going to, essentially, she's got a camera set up above her piece of paper, and she's got one that is all about the materials that you can use. She's got one that is about the techniques that you can use. And then she's got one for exercises for emotional expression through writing, all 3 of which she combined when we were breaking down the text for the 4 different dimensions to create the pictographic representations of the words, if that makes sense. So those of you that were in the imagery dimension, you've probably already had a bit of a preview of how that works in practice, because that dimension is specifically there to lead people into that way of working, if that makes sense. So in practice, kids can take a Taylor Swift lyric and they can interpret it in the same fashion. And so they can tell you what kind of rhythm it's using. They can tell you how the words kind of feel to them, how they might try and express them. We've had kids in Shakespeare workshops actually writing up whole speeches in this doodled kind of way, where, for instance, the word bite has teeth and things of that nature. And they find that being able to interpret the text visually in that way is a really nice way of them getting to own the words. And that idea of defacing the text to reveal the text really comes to the fore when you have kids who delight in being given the opportunity to mess with something which they feel like is not supposed to be messed with, right? One personal ambition of mine for this is to try and get some murals going where we actually get real street art with words, phrases, or short speeches that can be actually put up on walls, and that doesn't have to be a permanent feature. That can just be big sheets of poster roll, and then people will work up a draft, and then you can work together to do it as a kind of team project, things of that nature. but the groups that we piloted it with at Stratford Festival went nuts for it, which was lovely. And I look forward to the day when I receive pictures of crazy bits of Shakespeare from different school groups in Canada that have been interacting with it. It's always a joy. So with that, I think we're into questions now. So Q&A, thoughts, feelings, reactions, reflections, that kind of thing. Just to let you know that the full list of links, so to the introduction to each of the 4 dimensions, to the resource center for the calligraphy and stuff, all of those links will be sent to you as a follow-up to this session. So you will be able to use them in a classroom context. I find that sometimes having the links to be able to airdrop in partway through is more useful when you're breaking your interactions up across multiple sessions. So I hope that that's useful for you as well. But yeah, any questions from anybody? Hi, Liz.
Hi. The whole point about Shakespeare's imagery is that he does it with words.
Yes.
So you are kind of destroying half of Shakespeare from the beginning by telling.
Or if you think of the words as planting seeds in the audience's mind, and the audience is the one that's generating that image, then you're using that seed and putting it in fertile soil so that it can grow an original version of it. Because we don't do Shakespeare the same way every time, do we? Everyone that interprets it afresh, and this is a new way of interpreting that imagery afresh.
Well, it's maybe because I'm not a visual artist person, so it just terrifies me to be asked to do this with the letters.
Sure, and that's a totally fair point. I think one thing that we always do when we're running workshops on this, for instance, there was a big Hollywood movie called Knives Out, and it was a big budget thing. Daniel Craig's in it, all this kind of thing. And I share storyboards from Knives Out, and the storyboards are genuinely stick people that have just little lines and dashes around them. They are absolute rubbish. So one of the absolutely important things that you've recognized and that needs emphasizing is that there is no need to be good at this. It's not about being good, it's about being expressive.
Right. And the other question I'd like to ask you is, do you know whether it might be useful for people who from other languages who can only read Shakespeare in translation? So if you've got something visual instead of a letter, will it help them?
It's a really good question. I mean, obviously we've got it's multimodal, so you've got the audio of it as well that is accompanying it. And one of the things that we looked into, unfortunately there wasn't the budget to do it, but one of the things we looked into was converting this into a podcast series, so that you actually don't need the imagery at all to still get the nutritional content, if you want to put it that way, out of it. So while the imagery is emphasized, it's not the only aspect of the work that is valuable, I guess I will put it that way. And so for those people, perhaps it would be useful, but if you're reading Shakespeare in a translation, I think already a lot of the things that this is looking to explore within Shakespeare is no longer present, if that makes sense, because most people that translate Shakespeare tend to do it into prose rather than verse, and they tend to not adhere to specific rhetorical devices and things like that.
I've seen Russian, I've seen Beth on stage in Moscow, then it's done as verse, it's not done as prose.
Wonderful, that's great. Well, I guess with help, I suppose, will be the answer then. I think if they're going to be using similar kind of devices, but they will probably need an interpreter to bridge the gap between the first language version and then the version that they're doing. Certainly it's not yet available in other languages. I think expanding it to a second speech would be a thing that we'd be looking at doing before we were to go into
and what about
languages.
sign language for the deaf?
Yeah.
Because that's already using a dramatic aspect of language.
That's right. Yeah.
The rest of us don't use.
Yeah, 100%. And there is a copy of the script available on the Stratford Festival Classroom Connect website, so that can be interpreted by additional members of staff in the classroom. And there's also a sensory kind of guide as well, because obviously I'm aware that in going maximalist with it, you know, there's a richness of sensorial input there. That is something that not everybody thrives with, if you like. And so it can be stepped down in that way as well, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
Thank you. Most complicated speech I've seen done well. So the most complicated speech is either the Salic Law speech in Henry V or the degree speech in Troilus and Cressida. Now, obviously, one of those gets performed more often than the other. But there is a production of Troilus and Cressida going on at the Globe right now, I'm given to understand, or it's just finished. The degree speech is a real tough nut to crack because it relies so heavily on the actor's cadence to hold certain concepts in the air that they then return to, so that the audience can kind of follow the thread through it. I believe there is a version from the old John Barton BBC series that's available on YouTube. That's obviously free to check out. And also I took a crack at it, I don't mind saying, for a podcast, a Shakespeare learning podcast a few years ago, just to try and emphasize that aspect of it, that it's really hard to hold all of the ideas in it together so that they become cohesive. The Salic Law one is more difficult because obviously it's legalese, it's in verse, and it's about ancient history and dynastic claims to the throne. So there's several layers of complexity to that. In terms of seeing it done well, I believe it was an RSC production where they put a giant family tree on the floor, and essentially, you know, like the weatherman used to do on ITV, where there was a floating version of the UK and he'd walk around it. They essentially did that, where he would walk to the relevant line in the family tree when he was talking about that kind of aspect of it in order to try and help the audience follow along. So using the visuals to help the text, especially in those really knotty bits, which are maybe less poetic and more serving the audience their vegetables, if we put it that way. These are the ideas that you need to understand to follow the story, the exposition, as we now call it. It can be a really useful aid in that pursuit as well, I guess. Abstract art. I mean, I think the Ralph Steadman posters, you know, the one of the porter, I think, for Macbeth in particular sticks in my mind. I think that's really great. There's a wonderful Korean Macbeth poster where the back of her dress is cut like a knife and he has his hand on her back, so it looks like he's holding a dagger. That one's, for me, is like design classic. Yeah, it's wonderful. Really cool.
We've got another question there in the chat, Rob, from Patrick. I don't know if can you see that?
At a conference, talked about latest book where she has written small sections after having illustrations added. After that, I gave my class freedom to add illustrations within their work, and it was noticeable how they added images, but enjoyed playing with the font within their work because they wanted to highlight keywords. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think anything that you can do that allows them to like take ownership of it, and the visual is a really immediate way of doing that. Changing a font is 2 clicks, and so you can really, and obviously fonts are so expressive and so varied. We have hundreds of them on our laptops. They're readily available. So maybe in answer to Liz's question, someone that's maybe a bit more intimidated about having to do it by hand and kind of render imagery themselves, to select a font then becomes more of a taste question, right? Like, this word to me feels like this font. And so I think that's a really nice way of giving people a way in. I know that in Unearthing Shakespeare, my co-author Valerie Clayman Pye talked about using bold, underline, italics, different fonts, different highlight colors, things of that nature, or to signify different things within a speech when she's preparing it for performance. So I think having a digitally editable version of the text that is there for you to mess around with is a really nice thing to give students when they're working on Shakespeare, especially because it has the mighty undo button, so you can't break it. Yes, visually accessible for dyslexic students, yes. So Obviously, not everything is accessible for everyone. The way that we try to bridge that gap for dyslexic students is that as part of the resource centre, we have a plain text version of the speech, which they can have to use side by side as a point of reference. And in the bit that we skipped over because we didn't have time, when the actor first reads it out, they read it out with the plain text. And then as the line is read out with the plain text, that then transforms into the cryptographic imagery heavy version of it. And so they get to see that transformation line to line. And the text that we've used for the plain text was specially selected to be a disabled accessible font. So to the extent that we've tried to bridge that gap and orientate people within the imagery as to what line is which one, what is actually being said there. And then there are frequent reminders throughout the text itself. So yeah, it absolutely can potentially throw up problems and difficulties, but at the same time, because the words are now so much more like images, there's also an opportunity for them to take things from it that plain text creates a barrier to, because it's more emotionally expressive and it's got more of the sense of the word or the implication of the word, rather than just denoting, you know, its literal, what's the word that you would use? Demarcation, I suppose. So yeah, it's definitely a valid question. Try it, I think, would be my my advice, is just try it and see how they get on. I've had dyslexic people that have not loved it, and I've had dyslexic people who've gone nuts for it. So I think it is a case-by-case basis thing, really. Wonderful. Well, if there are no more questions, I guess we can call it there. It's been lovely to be able to explore this with you and get your questions and feedback on it. I hope it's something that you'll be willing to give a try in your classroom. I hope it's something that you can see about that multidisciplinary, someone said about tying it in between different parts of the curriculum. I think there's so much opportunity with Shakespeare in particular around that, whether it's, you know, geography, history, politics, but then, as we've seen now as well, visual art. And I think the idea of trying to tie it in new and novel ways is something that can provide students who maybe don't enjoy the classical approach that is taken in English literature to find their way into it kind of on their own terms, I suppose, really. So yeah. Yes, absolutely, Roma. Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be wonderful if you wouldn't mind passing that along. And I'm sure that will find its way to me. That'd be lovely.
Yes, thank you. If you'd like to pass any feedback via me, I can absolutely hand that on to Rob. So thank you, everybody, for being with us this afternoon. It's been such a pleasure. I will send you this recording, and I will also send you all the links so you can go ahead and have another explore and try this out in your classroom. So for now, I will say good evening and see you at another one of our sessions. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.